I have something to tell you, my husband Ethan said solemnly. My heart raced as Olivia, a young woman I'd never seen before, stepped forward, her pregnant belly unmistakable. Zoe, I'm leaving you for Olivia. She's carrying my child. The words hit me like a sledgehammer, shattering my world into a million pieces. I stared at Ethan, his face an unreadable mask, and then at Olivia, her eyes filled with a mixture of triumph and pity. How could you? I whispered, my voice trembling with a potent blend of anger and despair. Ethan's jaw clenched. It just happened, Zoe. I didn't plan for this. Didn't plan for it? I scoffed. You didn't trip and fall into her bed, Ethan. You made a choice. Olivia shifted uncomfortably, placing a hand on her swollen belly. I'm sorry, Zoe. We never meant to hurt you. I turned my gaze to her, my eyes narrowing. Save your apologies. They mean nothing to me. Ethan stepped forward, his hands held out in a placating gesture. Zoe, please, let's talk about this calmly. Calmly? I laughed bitterly. You want me to be calm when you're standing there telling me you've been cheating on me and that you're leaving me for your pregnant mistress? Olivia flinched at the word mistress, but I didn't care. She was the one who had wrecked my marriage, who had stolen my husband from me. Ethan's face hardened. I'm sorry, Zoe, but I've made my decision. I want a divorce. The word divorce hung in the air between us, heavy and final. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like the walls were closing in on me. What about Avery? I managed to choke out. What about our daughter? Ethan's eyes flickered with something that might have been guilt, but it was gone in an instant. Avery will understand. She's old enough to know that sometimes things don't work out between people. I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. No, Ethan. She's a 16-year-old girl who needs her father. You can't just abandon her like this. Olivia cleared her throat. Ethan and I have discussed this, Zoe. We want Avery to be a part of our lives, too. I whirled on her, my anger boiling over. You have no right to talk about my daughter. You're nothing to her, and you never will be. Ethan's face reddened. That's enough, Zoe. I won't have you talking to Olivia like that. I stared at him in disbelief. Are you serious? You're defending her? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I'm not defending anyone. I'm just trying to make this as painless as possible for everyone involved. I laughed harshly. Painless? You think there's anything painless about this? You've destroyed our family, Ethan. You've broken my heart and shattered our daughter's world. There's no coming back from that. Olivia shifted her weight, her hand still resting on her stomach. We should go, Ethan. Give Zoe some time to process this. Ethan nodded, his expression unreadable. You're right. We'll talk more later, Zoe. I'll have my lawyer draw up the divorce papers. With that, they turned and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with my shattered dreams and the ruins of my marriage. I sank to the floor, my body shaking with sobs as the reality of what had just happened washed over me. My husband, the man I had loved and trusted for nearly 2 decades, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And now I was left to pick up the pieces and try to rebuild my life without him. The days following Ethan's bombshell announcement were a blur of pain and confusion. I went through the motions of my daily life, but everything felt hollow and meaningless. At work, I struggled to focus on my patients, my mind constantly drifting back to the image of Olivia's pregnant belly and the cold, detached look in Ethan's eyes as he told me he was leaving me. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table picking at my dinner, Ethan walked in, his face a mask of determination. We need to talk, he said, pulling out a chair and sitting down across from me. I looked up at him, my eyes red and swollen from crying. What more is there to say, Ethan? You've made your choice. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. I've been offered a partnership at a law firm in another city. It's a great opportunity, and I think it's best if I take it. I stared at him in disbelief. You're leaving? Like that? Just like that? Ethan sighed. It's for the best, Zoe. We both need some space right now. Space? I scoffed. What about Avery? What about our daughter? He had the decency to look guilty for a moment. I'll still be there for Avery. I'll visit her as often as I can. I shook my head. You can't just walk in and out of her life whenever it's convenient for you, Ethan. She needs stability, not a part-time father. Ethan's jaw clenched. I'm doing what I think is right for everyone, Zoe. I need you to support me on this. I laughed bitterly. Support you? After everything you've done, you expect me to support you? He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. I'm not asking for your permission, Zoe. I'm telling you what I'm doing. I'll be leaving next week. With that, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving me stunned and heartbroken. I couldn't believe that the man I had once loved so deeply could be so callous and selfish. The next week passed in a haze of tears and anger. Avery, who had been staying with a friend, finally came home, her eyes red and puffy from crying. How could he do this to us, Mom? She asked, her voice breaking. I pulled her into a tight hug, my own tears falling onto her hair. I don't know, sweetheart. I don't know. On the day of Ethan's departure, I watched from the window as he loaded his suitcases into the trunk of his car. Olivia was there too, her hand resting on her belly as she smiled up at him. The sight made me sick to my stomach. As Ethan climbed into the driver's seat, he glanced back at the house, his eyes meeting mine for a brief moment. I saw no remorse, no guilt in his gaze, only a cold, hard determination. He started the engine and pulled out of the driveway, disappearing down the street without a backward glance. In the weeks that followed, Ethan became increasingly unreachable. He ignored my calls and texts, leaving me to handle all the day-to-day responsibilities of running a household and raising a teenage daughter on my own. I was exhausted and overwhelmed, but I refused to let Ethan see how much he had hurt me. One night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, a thought occurred to me. Ethan had always been so careful, so meticulous in his planning. How had he let something like this happen? How had he let himself get Olivia pregnant? The more I thought about it, the more I began to suspect that there was more to the story than Ethan was letting on. And as the weeks turned into months, and Ethan's time away neared its end, I knew that I had to find out the truth, no matter how painful it might be. As Ethan's year-long stint at the law firm in the other city drew to a close, I found myself feeling a mixture of anticipation and dread. Part of me hoped that the time apart had given him a chance to reflect on his actions and realize the damage he had caused, but another part of me knew that was unlikely. One evening, I arrived home from a long shift at the hospital, exhausted and emotionally drained. As I walked through the front door, I heard voices coming from the living room. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized Ethan's deep baritone, but then I heard another voice, a woman's voice, and my blood ran cold. I stepped into the living room, and there they were, Ethan and Olivia, sitting on the couch, their hands intertwined. Olivia's belly was even more pronounced now, and she had a smug smile on her face as she looked up at me. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger. Ethan stood up, his expression unreadable. "Zoe, we need to talk." "Damn right we do," I snapped. "What is she doing here, Ethan?" Olivia stood up too, her hand resting on her belly. "I'm here because Ethan and I are in love, Zoe. We're going to be a family." I stared at her, my mouth hanging open in shock. "A family? Are you serious?" Ethan stepped forward, his hands held out in a placating gesture. "Zoe, please, let's discuss this calmly." "Calmly?" I laughed harshly. "You want me to be calm when you're standing there with your pregnant mistress, telling me you're leaving me for her?" Olivia flinched at the word mistress, but Ethan's face hardened. "I'm sorry, Zoe, but I've made my decision. I want a divorce." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. "A divorce? Just like that? What about Avery, Ethan? What about our daughter?" As if on cue, Avery appeared in the doorway, her face pale and her eyes wide with shock. "Dad, what's going on?" Ethan turned to her, his expression softening. "Avery, sweetheart, I'm sorry you had to find out like this." Avery's gaze flicked to Olivia, then back to Ethan. "Find out what? What's happening?" I stepped forward, my arms outstretched. "Avery, honey, your father and I are getting a divorce. He's leaving us for Olivia." Avery's face crumpled, and she shook her head. No, this can't be happening." Ethan moved towards her, but she backed away, her eyes filling with tears. "How could you do this to us, Dad? How could you abandon us like this?" Olivia stepped forward, her hand on Ethan's arm. "Avery, I know this is hard, but your father and I love each other. We want you to be a part of our lives, too." Avery's eyes flashed with anger. "I don't want anything to do with you," she spat. "You ruined our family." Ethan's face reddened. "Avery, don't speak to Olivia like that." I stepped between them, my hands on Avery's shoulders. "Ethan, you have no right to tell her how to feel. You're the one who betrayed us, who broke our family apart." Olivia's face twisted with anger. "Don't act like you're innocent in all of this, Zoe. You drove Ethan away with your constant nagging and your inability to support his career." I whirled on her, my fists clenched. "How dare you? You have no idea what our marriage was like, what we went through together." Ethan stepped between us, his hands held up. "Enough, both of you. This isn't helping." I turned to him, my eyes blazing. "You're right, Ethan. This isn't helping. You know what would help? If you and your mistress got the hell out of my house and out of our lives." Ethan's jaw clenched, but he nodded. "Fine, we'll go. But this isn't over, Zoe. I'll have my lawyer draw up the divorce papers." With that, he took Olivia's hand and led her out of the room, leaving me and Avery alone, our hearts shattered and our lives in ruins. As I sat in the empty living room, my mind reeling from the confrontation with Ethan and Olivia, a memory suddenly surfaced, hitting me like a tidal wave. It was from 2 years ago when Ethan had convinced me to take out a second mortgage on our house to invest in a business venture that he claimed was a sure thing. I remembered the day clearly. Ethan had come home from work, his eyes shining with excitement. "Zoe, I've got an incredible opportunity," he had said, pulling me close. "One of my clients is starting a new business, and he's offering me a chance to get in on the ground floor." I had been skeptical at first, but Ethan had been so persuasive, so confident. He had shown me charts and graphs, talked about projected earnings and return on investment. In the end, I had agreed, despite the nagging feeling in the back of my mind that something wasn't quite right. My brother, Lucas, who worked as a financial advisor, had been less than thrilled when I told him about the investment. "Zoe, this sounds too good to be true," he had warned me over the phone. "I think you need to be very careful about putting your money into something like this." I had brushed off his concerns, telling him that Ethan knew what he was doing, that he would never steer me wrong. Now, sitting in the aftermath of Ethan's betrayal, I realized how foolish I had been. Suddenly, a thought occurred to me. What if Ethan's business venture had been a scam all along? What if he had used our money, our future, to fund his affair with Olivia? The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Ethan had been so insistent on getting the money quickly, on keeping the details of the investment vague. He had always been so careful with our finances before, so meticulous in his planning. Why would he suddenly throw caution to the wind and risk everything on a gamble? I felt a surge of anger course through me. How could I have been so blind, so trusting? I had let Ethan manipulate me, let him use me, and now he was throwing me away like yesterday's trash. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I wasn't going to let him destroy my life and walk away unscathed. I was going to make him pay for what he had done, even if it meant playing along with his little game for a while longer. I took a deep breath and picked up my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. "Lucas," I said when he answered, "I need your help." Over the next few days, I put my plan into motion. I played the role of the dutiful wife, agreeing to Ethan's demands for a quick and easy divorce. I even helped him pack his things, smiling through gritted teeth as he and Olivia loaded box after box into their car. But behind the scenes, I was gathering evidence. I went through our financial records with a fine-toothed comb, looking for any discrepancies, any signs of fraud. I contacted old friends and colleagues of Ethan's, asking if they had heard anything about his business venture or his relationship with Olivia. Slowly but surely, a picture began to emerge. Ethan had been lying to me for months, maybe even years. He had been siphoning money from our accounts, funneling it into his own private investments. He had been using our money to fund his lavish trips with Olivia, to buy her expensive gifts and fancy dinners. And the business venture? It was a sham, just as I had suspected. Ethan had convinced his client to invest in a company that didn't even exist, promising him returns that were impossible to deliver. When the whole thing had collapsed, Ethan had been left holding the bag, desperate to find a way out. That was where Olivia had come in. She was his escape hatch, his ticket to a new life. And I was just collateral damage, a loose end to be tied up and discarded. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I was going to make sure that Ethan paid for what he had done, that he felt the same pain and betrayal that I had felt. And I knew just where to start. The day I moved out of the house was one of the hardest days of my life. Avery and I packed up our belongings in silence, tears streaming down our faces as we taped up boxes and loaded them into the moving truck. Ethan and Olivia were there too, watching from the front porch with smug expressions on their faces. As I carried the last box out to the truck, Olivia called out to me. "Zoe, wait." I turned to face her, my jaw clenched. "What do you want?" She walked over to me, her hand resting on her belly. "I just wanted to say that I'm sorry things turned out this way. I never meant to hurt you." I laughed harshly. "You never meant to hurt me? You stole my husband, destroyed my family, and you have the nerve to say you're sorry?" Olivia's face hardened. "I didn't steal Ethan. He chose me. He chose us." I shook my head. "You're delusional if you think this is going to last. Ethan is a liar and a cheat. He'll do the same thing to you that he did to me." Olivia's eyes flashed with anger. "You're just bitter because you couldn't keep him satisfied. You drove him away with your constant nagging and your boring, predictable life." I felt my blood boil, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Believe what you want, Olivia, but mark my words, you'll regret the day you ever met Ethan." With that, I turned and climbed into the moving truck, slamming the door behind me. As we drove away, I caught a glimpse of Ethan and Olivia in the rearview mirror, their arms around each other as they watched us go. The apartment Avery and I moved into was small and cramped, a far cry from the spacious house we had shared with Ethan, but it was ours, and we were determined to make the best of it. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into my work, taking on extra shifts at the hospital to keep myself busy. Avery enrolled in a new school, trying to make friends and adjust to her new life. But everywhere we turned, it seemed like Ethan and Olivia were there, flaunting their relationship on social media and in public. One day, as I was scrolling through Facebook, I saw a post from Olivia that made my blood run cold. It was a picture of her and Ethan at a fancy restaurant, her hand resting on her belly as she smiled up at him. The caption read, "Date night with my handsome husband and our little bundle of joy. # blessed, love wins." I felt sick to my stomach. How could they be so callous, so insensitive? Did they have no shame, no remorse for what they had done? As I stared at the picture, I remembered something else, something that I had almost forgotten in the chaos of the past few weeks. When Ethan had convinced me to invest in his business venture, he had promised me that it was a sure thing, that we would see returns within a few months. But it had been over a year now, and I had never seen a penny of that money. In fact, I had almost forgotten about the investment entirely, too caught up in the drama of Ethan's affair and the divorce. I felt a surge of anger course through me. What if Ethan had lied about the investment, too? What if he had used our money, our future, to fund his affair with Olivia? I knew I needed to find out the truth. I needed to know just how deep Ethan's betrayal ran. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "Hello, Marcus? It's Zoe. I need your help with something." Marcus was an old friend from college, a private investigator who had helped me out of a few tight spots over the years. I knew that if anyone could uncover the truth about Ethan's business dealings, it was him. As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of determination wash over me. I was going to find out the truth, no matter what it took, and when I did, Ethan and Olivia were going to pay for what they had done. I was in the middle of a busy shift at the hospital when I heard a commotion coming from the lobby. I stepped out from behind the nurse's station to see what was going on and froze when I saw Olivia standing there, her face twisted with anger as she screamed at the security guard, "I demand to see her!" Olivia shouted, her voice echoing off the walls. "She's been spreading lies about me, trying to turn everyone against me." The security guard held up his hands, trying to calm her down. "Ma'am, please, you need to leave. You're causing a disturbance." Olivia's eyes flashed with rage. "I'm not going anywhere until I talk to that lying bitch." I stepped forward, my heart pounding in my chest. "Olivia, what the hell are you doing here?" She whirled around to face me, her finger pointing accusingly. "You know exactly why I'm here, Zoe. You've been telling people that I'm a homewrecker, that I stole Ethan from you." I laughed harshly. "I haven't been telling people anything. They can see the truth for themselves." Olivia's face reddened. "You're just jealous because Ethan chose me over you. You can't stand the fact that he loves me more than he ever loved you." I shook my head. You're delusional, Olivia. Ethan doesn't love you. He's just using you like he used me. Olivia's hand flew up, and for a moment I thought she was going to slap me. But the security guard stepped between us, his voice firm. That's enough. Ma'am, you need to leave now, or I'll be forced to call the police. Olivia glared at me, her eyes filled with hatred. This isn't over, Zoe. You'll pay for what you've done. With that, she turned and stormed out of the hospital, leaving me shaken and angry. A few hours later, I was just finishing up my shift when my phone rang. It was Avery, and she sounded frantic. Mom, you need to come to the coffee shop on Main Street right away. Something's happened. I felt my heart sink. What is it, Avery? Are you okay? I'm fine, but Olivia's here, and she's accusing me of stealing her bracelet. She's threatening to call the police. I cursed under my breath. I'll be right there, honey. Don't say anything to her until I get there. I raced to the coffee shop, my mind whirling with possibilities. When I arrived, I found Avery sitting at a table, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. Olivia was standing over her, her arms crossed and a smug expression on her face. What the hell is going on here? I demanded, stepping between them. Olivia smirked. Your daughter is a thief, that's what's going on. She stole my diamond bracelet. I turned to Avery, my heart breaking at the fear in her eyes. Avery, is this true? She shook her head vehemently. No, Mom, I swear, I didn't take anything. Olivia scoffed. Then how do you explain this? She reached into her purse and pulled out a diamond bracelet, holding it up triumphantly. I felt a surge of anger. You planted that on her, didn't you? You're trying to frame her. Olivia's eyes widened in mock surprise. Why would I do that? I have no reason to lie. I turned to the barista behind the counter. Did you see what happened? The barista nodded. I did. I saw the whole thing on the security camera. My heart leaped. Can you show us the footage? The barista led us to the back room, where she pulled up the security footage on a small screen. As we watched, I saw Olivia walk up to Avery's table and slip something into her purse when she wasn't looking. I turned to Olivia, my eyes blazing with fury. You lying bitch. You set her up. Olivia's face paled. That's not what happened. The footage must be doctored. I shook my head. Save it, Olivia. We all saw what you did. You're not going to get away with this. I turned to the barista. Call the police. I want to file a report for attempted fraud and false accusation. As the barista dialed 911, I put my arm around Avery, holding her close. It's okay, honey. We're going to make sure she pays for what she did. And as we waited for the police to arrive, I felt a sense of satisfaction wash over me. Olivia had played right into my hands, and now she was going to face the consequences of her actions. It was only a matter of time before Ethan met the same fate. The police arrived at the coffee shop within minutes, and I wasted no time in showing them the security footage of Olivia planting the bracelet in Avery's purse. The officers took statements from Avery, the barista, and me, and then they turned to Olivia, their faces stern. Ma'am, can you explain why you put the bracelet in the young lady's purse? One of the officers asked. Olivia's face was pale, and she stammered as she tried to come up with an excuse. I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't do anything. The officer shook his head. The footage doesn't lie, ma'am. We have clear evidence of you committing attempted fraud and making a false accusation. Olivia's eyes darted around the room, and I could see the panic setting in. This is all a misunderstanding. I'm sure we can work something out. But the officers weren't having it. They placed Olivia under arrest and led her out of the coffee shop in handcuffs, ignoring her protests and pleas for mercy. As I watched her being driven away in the back of the police car, I felt a sense of satisfaction wash over me. Olivia had finally been caught in her web of lies, and now she was going to face the consequences of her actions. But I knew that this was only the beginning. I still had to deal with Ethan and his own misdeeds. Over the next few days, I gathered all the evidence I had collected about Ethan's financial wrongdoings and his affair with Olivia. I compiled it into a neat package and sent it off to the authorities, along with a detailed explanation of what had happened. I knew that it was only a matter of time before Ethan was called in for questioning, and I was right. A week later, I received a call from the detective handling the case, asking me to come in and give a statement. As I sat in the interrogation room, Facing the detective across the table, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I had done everything I could to make sure that Ethan and Olivia paid for what they had done, and now it was out of my hands. The detective leaned forward, his eyes serious. "Mrs. Parker, we've reviewed the evidence you provided, and it's clear that your husband has been engaging in some serious financial misconduct. We've also uncovered evidence of his affair with Ms. Olivia Thompson." I nodded, my voice steady. I knew he was up to something, but I never imagined it would be this bad. The detective sighed. "Unfortunately, this kind of thing happens more often than you might think. People get caught up in their own desires and lose sight of what's really important." I felt a lump form in my throat. "I just want to make sure that he doesn't get away with it. He needs to face the consequences of his actions." The detective nodded. "We'll do everything we can to make sure that happens, Mrs. Parker. You have my word." As I left the police station, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I had done everything I could to make sure that Ethan and Olivia paid for what they had done, and now it was out of my hands. A few days later, I received word that Ethan had been arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. His assets had been frozen, and he was facing the possibility of serious jail time. But Ethan, true to form, had managed to weasel his way out of the worst of it. He had struck a plea deal with the prosecutors, agreeing to testify against some of his former business associates in exchange for a reduced sentence. And then, in a move that shocked everyone, he had fled town, leaving Olivia to face the music on her own. She was convicted of filing a false police report and attempted fraud and sentenced to a year in jail. As I watched the news coverage of Ethan's disappearance and Olivia's sentencing, I felt a sense of bitter satisfaction. They had both gotten what they deserved, even if Ethan had managed to escape the worst of it. But I knew that I couldn't dwell on the past forever. I had to focus on the future, on rebuilding my life and my relationship with my daughter. And so, with a heavy heart but a clear conscience, I turned off the TV and went to find Avery, ready to start the next chapter of our lives together. In the weeks following Ethan's disappearance and Olivia's conviction, I threw myself into the task of rebuilding my life. With the help of my brother Lucas, I started to unravel the tangled web of lies and deceit that Ethan had left behind. Lucas and I spent hours poring over financial records and bank statements, trying to make sense of the mess Ethan had made. What we uncovered was even worse than I had imagined. Not only had Ethan been siphoning money from our joint accounts to fund his affair with Olivia, but he had also been embezzling from his clients at the law firm. He had been using the money to pay for lavish vacations and expensive gifts for Olivia, all while telling me that we were struggling to make ends meet. I felt sick to my stomach as I looked at the evidence of Ethan's betrayal. How could I have been so blind, so trusting? I had given him everything, and he had repaid me with lies and heartbreak. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. With Lucas's help, I filed for divorce and sole custody of Avery. I presented the court with all the evidence of Ethan's financial misdeeds and infidelity, and they ruled in my favor. I was granted the house and a substantial portion of Ethan's assets, as well as full custody of Avery. Ethan, disgraced and facing legal troubles of his own, was forced to move back in with his parents, his tail tucked between his legs. As I watched the moving truck pull away from the house, carrying the last of Ethan's belongings, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It was finally over. I was free from his lies and manipulation, free to start a new life with my daughter. But even as I celebrated my victory, I knew that the scars of Ethan's betrayal would never fully heal. Avery and I had been through hell, and it would take time for us to recover from the trauma of the past year. One evening, as Avery and I sat on the couch watching a movie, she turned to me with tears in her eyes. "Mom, why did Dad do this to us? Why did he hurt us like this?" I felt my heart break all over again as I looked at my daughter's pain-filled face. "I don't know, honey. Sometimes people do terrible things and we may never understand why." Avery nodded, her lip trembling. "I hate him for what he did. I hate him for leaving us." I pulled her into a tight hug, my own tears falling onto her hair. "I know, baby. I hate him too, but we can't let that hate consume us. We have to find a way to move forward, to heal." Avery looked up at me, her eyes shining with determination. I want to be strong like you, Mom. I want to be brave and resilient, no matter what life throws at us. I smiled through my tears, my heart swelling with pride. You already are, Avery. You're the strongest, bravest person I know. As we sat there, holding each other and crying, I knew that we had a long road ahead of us. But I also knew that we would make it through, together. And so, with a deep breath and a renewed sense of purpose, I turned my attention to the future. I focused on my work at the hospital, pouring my energy into helping others and making a difference in the world. I spent time with Avery, rebuilding our relationship and creating new memories together. Slowly but surely, the pain of Ethan's betrayal began to fade. It would always be a part of our story, a dark chapter in the book of our lives. But it would not define us. We were survivors, Avery and I. We had been through the worst that life could throw at us, and we had come out the other side stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. And as I looked at my daughter, her eyes shining with hope and resilience, I knew that we would be okay. We had each other. And that was all that mattered.